Okay, I think I'll go ahead and get started with my intro as people start joining us. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight virtually. This is a really wonderful way, I think, to celebrate the end of a really wonderful exhibition. Thank you all for joining us. Just a reminder to all of you who have not yet seen Fire Transforms, you have one more day. The exhibition is open tomorrow, Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. I really encourage those who haven't seen the exhibition to come by and see it, or for those of you who saw it and loved it, to have one more look at the show before it leaves us forever. I was at the Art Center earlier, and I had so many visitors drop by my office to tell me how important the exhibition was, how moving it was. So appreciative that they had a chance to see the show before it closes. So please come by and see it. I have a few thank yous before we officially begin with this program. I first want to thank the exhibitions team at the Palo Alto Art Center who put together a really beautiful show, particularly Joseph Sachs, our preparator, and Amy Cohen, our exhibitions registrar. I also want to thank, of course, all of the artists. I want to thank members and donors of the Palo Alto Art Center Foundation for making free programs like this possible and free admission exhibitions like Fire Transforms possible. Thank you so much. I also want to thank folks behind the scenes, our Art Center Foundation staff, Charday and Karen Kwan. Thank you all. And last but not least, I would like to thank Rina Faletti for organizing a really beautiful exhibition. It's been a pleasure to work with Rina. She's been a wonderful collaborator and just a really insightful curator. And we've all really appreciated the chance to work with her. So I'm going to turn it over to her now.
Thank you, Karen. Mutual thoughts about working with the Art Center and all of the people that you mentioned, especially the artists. So welcome to our last event before Fire Transforms closes. We have 4 artists tonight who are going to speak about, each of them is going to present about their own work in the show, and also some of the background about their art making and their art careers. Extremely interesting, wonderful background that we don't always get when we're walking through a gallery exhibition or a museum exhibition, looking at the art. Even the labels that we labor to give information on don't always, never tell us all of the personal side of that story. So tonight you get 4 stories from outstanding artists who are using fire as a medium to create their work, in addition to other things as well. But tonight they're mostly going to focus on creating with fire. The order in which we'll go is, first we will hear from Mirang Wonne, who is a mixed media sculptor, and also we almost might call her a textile artist, but she'll tell us her own definition of herself and her fantastic large-scale works. Second, Jonah Ward will talk to us about the phenomenal creation that he made in a special room called the Glass Gallery, which was a room dedicated specifically for one artist to create an immersive exhibition. And Jonah, too, started out as a painter, but we would probably call him, and he'll tell us himself, a mixed media sculptor as well, and an installation artist. Kala Stein joins us from the North Bay as well, and she is a potter, I would say, and also a ceramic artist. Again, she'll give us her own terms when she presents. And last, tonight, giving us our final wonderful closing to Fire Transforms is Beth Ames Swartz. And Beth has been making art with fire and other interesting mediums since the 1970s, and she'll tell us about her career and the art that she's made for our exhibition. So welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. We really appreciate all the time you've put into your presentations. The way that it'll work is that each presenter will present for about 7 or 8 minutes, and we'd like you to hold your questions, which actually will be easy because all you have to do is type them into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So Mirang, Would you please begin telling us about the fantastic art that we can now see on the screen? You'll have to unmute yourself. Mirang, are you aware that there you go.
Got it. My inspiration for the artworks shown at the Fire Transforms exhibit began when I moved to California in early 1980s. I became fascinated by the beauty and the energy of California's light, which is so intense and abundant. I wish to capture and reinterpret this amazing energy into my art with my own language. This resulted in many of my artworks, very often titled California Light, Capturing Sunlight, Lines and Light, and Light Ripples. I would like to start this presentation with my very first solo show images because it will explain best my current artwork shown here in the Fire Transforms exhibit. I was born in Korea, went to Seoul National University as a painting major, and finished as a graduate school. I received the Chancellor's Award at my graduation and was able to go to France in 1970, where I received a 2-year residency scholarship from French government. This was the single scholarship offered to the entire art fields in Korea at that time, which included fine arts, music, dance, performance arts, etc. I was sent to École Nationale Supérieure des Arts Décoratifs in Paris. During my stay in Paris for almost 6 years, I participated in many museum shows, such as Salon de Mai at Musée d'Art Moderne de Paris, Grand Séjour d'aujourd'hui at Grand Palais, et Septentrion at the Musée de Lille, etc. In 1973, I was offered a solo show at the 3 immense pavilions at Parc Floral de Paris, which is Flower Park. My main medium was mulberry papers, colored with my own homemade tempera colors. I missed my motherland so much that all the forms and the colors came naturally from my memories of Korea. Some elements were over 12 feet tall. Not realizing it, I made a huge installation exhibit in very large scale. For that exhibit, I used the rocks, mulberry papers, wire, fabric, etc. I even made my own invitation cards with the woodcut print on mulberry paper. Following a brief teaching stint at my alma mater, Seoul National University, I moved to US and naturalized. After several years in New York, I settled in San Francisco Bay Area in 1983. After experimenting with various mediums, such as galvanized wire and rebar, copper mesh, and copper sheets with patina, I found stainless steel mesh to be the best medium for my concept because it is light but very sturdy, luminous like metal, and does not erode over time. Lately, I have been making paintings with 18 and 24 karat gold leaf on stainless steel mesh, adapting a centuries-old gold gild techniques. My most recent series are metal collages, as you see in the image, using both paintings and fire on the metal mesh, as in my installation work, Light Ripples. My torched screen works begin with a hanging stainless steel mesh cloth to the ceiling. I hold a torch lit with a flame and look at the surface of the stainless steel mesh. It is blank, but there are so many colors and reflections already there in my mind. With the blowtorch, I started to draw with a flame as if I'm doing calligraphy with a sumi ink or charcoal drawing. Because I wear eye protective gear, I see only the flame from the burning torch. After a while, I feel the tip of the flame pulls my hand where it wants to go, or some unknown being makes lines for me. It becomes a kind of a meditation process for me. The fire moves freely on screen, all throughout, making incredibly free lines. One by one, irregular lines form, overlapping one on top of the other, and slowly makes some shapes. I see giant petals moving in the breeze, disappearing in mist and fog, and then blooming again in the bright California sunlight. My largest public commission works made of a torched screen was for the entrance lobby of Stanford Cancer Center in San Jose. Installation California Light with 4 very tall torched screens, 15 feet high by 12 feet wide. Many times, people ask me how I came up with the idea of a torched screen. In 2010, I was invited to do a solo show at the Korean galleries in Seoul. They have 2 stories plus 1 basement. So I will do main galleries as usual, but for the basement, I thought I will do some kind of a lantern installation because there was no light. So I started to work with stainless steel mesh, and it was surprisingly very sharp, and it made cuts in my skin. So I went to my friends next door, sculptor friends, and I asked, how can you make this edge smooth so I can work with? So he went to his gas tank and torch, and he just, boom, he burned it. And I looked at it. So he melted down to black. But the edge, here's a sample. I don't know whether you can see clearly. So the edge was kind of smooth out, but I look at the edge part, it makes some kind of lines, was very interesting. So I looked at it, I said, wow, this is better than my original idea of a lantern cubic installation. So okay. So I purchased my own torch sets and gas tanks and then fire extinguisher in case something happened. And then I tried many different various effects of the fire. And so I can say right now, so this technique just I discovered by accident, and I'm so glad that I did. And I hope by this exhibit with my artwork, I hope people enjoy and also share this sublime beauty of the nature, and that I wanted to capture with my tools and unusual media. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah.
Thank you, Mirang. That's great, giving us your background on your work. For those of you who have comments or questions for Mirang, go ahead and go into that, press that Q&A button, and you can write your comments and questions in if you have any. Next, we'll hear from Jonah Ward. Jonah made an installation for the Glass Gallery, as I had explained earlier, and was very happy to, for the first time, have an entire room to work with to create an installation. Jonah, tell us about it.
All right. So as Rina said, I'm Jonah Ward, and I had a whole room to myself, and I made an immersive art installation called Born from Within the Burnt Forest. And what I really wanted to get across to the viewer was the feeling of and the concept of the destruction and creation, and how they are intertwined infinitely and indefinitely. And I wanted to immerse the viewer into that and kind of get a feeling of both of those things happening at the same time. And so I thought the best way to do that was to create a forest, because within a forest there is destruction and creation is happening simultaneously all the time. And that could be something as extreme as a wildfire coming in, or just the natural slow decay and decomposition. And from that, new life comes into being, because there's some things that need fire to come in to resprout and grow, and like mushrooms and stuff will come out of the decay and decomposition of the forest. So I wanted the viewer to really kind of get all of that happening at the same time. And the concept behind that really started way back when I was born at my house on 220 acres, 40 minutes east of Willits, in a little small town, and really just growing up in nature, immersed in it from the get-go. I really enjoyed it, and it's influenced my art all the way up until this point. And going through my art career, I got into college as a painting and drawing major, and I always knew I really wanted to take a glass class. And once I did, I really just fell in love with it, and all of the materials and all the process behind it, and just using fire and water and wood and paper, and even beeswax, which all of those things I use now in a lot of my art. It just really had this, I was just drawn to it by this intrinsic primal connection to it. And there's just a seductiveness of the glass that really drew me in, but it was really just that kind of raw part of it that I really, really enjoyed. And during my studies there, I needed to do one project for a whole semester, and it was just to make one thing at the end of the semester. And it started with just 3 drawings, and we had to draw in a way that we've never drawn before. And it was really about process and how do you get from point A to point B, and really focusing on how you make something being very important, and almost just as important as what you make. And so the 3 drawings, I took one and I put it on my ceiling, and I had to jump up and make marks on the paper. And then the other one I put down on the ground, and I dipped my wheels of my bike in paint and rode across it. And then the last one I wanted to take into the glass studio, because I felt like I needed to burn it somehow with the glass maybe. And so I brought a piece of paper in there, and I laid it down, and I dripped some glass onto it. And of course the paper just went up in flames. And then, so I realized, okay, of course, think about what you're doing. And so we use a lot of water, like paper soaked in water, to shape the glass. I was like, I wet the paper down first, and then I dripped glass onto it, and the water acted as a kind of a shield for the glass, the heat of the glass, and it only burned where the glass was. And it was a very aha moment for me, and really made me realize that I can, use a medium like glass in a different way than, just making something out of glass. I can use it and its natural fluidity and intensity, and to create something completely different. And so I started the glass burn panel series, where I take molten glass. It's about 2000 degrees when it comes out of the furnace, and I'm literally laying it down, and I'm essentially drawing with glass. And then I peel the glass off, and it leaves behind all the burn lines into the wood. And at the same time I was doing that, I thought maybe I could do some sort of 3-dimensional aspect of that. And so I was taking chunks of wood and dripping glass onto it, and really just kind of building up this layer of glass, and then taking the wood out and leaving behind this kind of hollowed form of the glass. And then this other process I came up with, I was taking also another class at the same time, an interface class, which really had to do with kind of one thing reacting with another thing that created a third thing. And it really just got me going with this process with, using the same materials I was using paper and water and fire. And I just decided to run streams of water down the paper and continuous little streams, and then with a torch burn the paper, and it burned in between the water, and acting as as sort of a mask from the fire. And so it was this kind of intense destructive process, and kind of chaotic, but then it really transformed the paper into something new and beautiful and unique. And so I knew I wanted to use all of these processes that I'd come up with and had been using for many years to build my forest, because it all kind of encompassed the same idea of kind of destruction and creation. And so the three-dimensional tree forms are all done with the burning water process. There's 2 layers to that for each tree. And then you'll see in the next slide, there's a glass sculpture in the center. And then in the surrounding 3 walls, you got a kind of a perimeter forest where I used really thin pieces of veneered wood and dripped the molten glass onto it to burn the lines into that. So you kind of have the perimeter forest, and then you're also able to walk around these 3-dimensional trees. And then here you can see I put the glass drip sculptures in the center, and it really lent itself to a very ephemeral sort of ghostly, soul-like, if you will, of the tree, that something was kind of lost. And then I also really wanted to use the glass in another way to represent kind of something new and the life coming back into the forest. So at the center tree, I have the forest duff here, and I had tons of little strands of glass underneath that were representing mycelium of the mushrooms, basically the roots of the mushroom. And there's certain mushrooms like morel mushrooms that need a fire to come through the forest to have them reproduce. And so I wanted to really kind of show that new life coming back into this space, that something destructive had come through it. And then on the final wall, kind of a representation of everything that in the room that I really wanted the viewer to kind of stop and pause and look and just kind of take different aspects of the show and show them in a way that made them sort of special, and you could really stop and get up close with it. And so that was the last bit on the wall on my installation, Born from Within the Burnt Forest. And I just like to quick little thank you to Rina and all the people at the Palo Alto Art Center just for the opportunity, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jonah. Fantastic background on your work. I always love listening to artists talk about their processes. So Mirang and Jonah started out by talking about a little bit larger scale, well, a lot bit larger scale works in an installation format. Now Kala Stein will talk about pots in relation to space. Go ahead, Kala. Looking forward to hearing your talk about your work.
Okay, thank you. Let me just get set up here. Okay, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to show with such a wonderful group of artists at the Palo Alto Art Center, and to all the staff. It's a huge undertaking to put together such a big show, and with such great considerations for the curation. So thank you, Rina, and all of the staff and artists. This is my piece. I'm Kala Stein. This is a triptych of coil-built pots with slip on them and gas fired, and there's photographs shown behind them that contextualize the idea around the piece. It's called Urns for Manzanita, and these are symbolic urns for a specific manzanita forest that was burned in the 2017 fires near my house in Sonoma. And to me, it was a very sacred place. It was a place I passed by multiple times a week, and there's just something sort of ancient and sacred and peaceful and special about this place. So when it was destroyed in the fires, I felt like I wanted to not only spend time with the place, like to grieve for what was lost, but to observe the trees in a different state of being in that post-fire charred way, where it doesn't have any leaves, where it's all about the skeletal structure and the form of the branches and the texture of the burnt wood. So I ended up doing sort of a mini residency amongst the trees on this land, and did a bunch of photography and recording and observational just interacting with it to hopefully inspire me to make something in response. So Jonah touched on this too, with the rejuvenation that happens after fires and these little moments where there's a wildflower poking up or wildlife coming back into the area, really give hope. So the piece is a lot about loss, but it's a lot about hope and the idea that nothing lasts forever. But there's beauty in that too, in that life cycle. I wanted to create a ceramic surface that looked like the charred wood, something that was burned. So I do a lot of testing and material process experimentation with the kiln. So I consider the firing as part of my process, and the kiln is a collaborator with me. These are the pieces, and I should mention that the triptych is a new version of a piece that I made for a show that was shown that happened in 2018 at the Sonoma Valley Museum of Art. And it was a similar concept with the vessels, and I had digital imagery behind it from the same residency in the forest. So these are the new pieces I made for Palo Alto. They're coil built out of black clay and gas fired. And I'm using slip over glaze to shrink more than the glaze and create this cracked effect. There's a lot of unpredictability in it. So there's always something unknown that happens afterwards. And thank you, Marie, for sending images. I don't know if you're here now, but she has great images of the work. You can see that they're also in oval format, so they can fit nicely against the wall. And have a little bit of an unexpected quality to them. So I wanted to talk about the work in the show, but I also wanted to touch on the work that I'm currently doing. And this is a new body of work that still is based on environmental issues and specifically water conservation and the resource of water. I'm from upstate New York, where there's plenty of water. So living in California for the last 7 years has really been an amazing experience to learn about water here and how it's used and needed and not around in some places. These are digital prints of photographs I took, and they're printed in ceramic material. So they're fired onto ready-made plates. And the concept comes from the tradition of porcelain plates as tributes or commemorative plates to important places and people and events. And so not only do these pieces touch on that tradition, but also quilting tradition, where fragments and remnants of discarded material would be put back together and stitched and repurposed into something new. This is a piece called Ghost Water it's a subway tiles that I made, and these are the remnants from an installation I did for a home. These are the seconds and the cast-offs, the ones that were warped or cracked, and I'm soaking them in a cobalt dye and then firing them. So I'm basically like showing what's wrong with the tile, with the crazing and the discoloration. And the idea is that it could play with the idea of macro or micro. It could be a map, it could be a built road system, it could be a natural system, it could look like water or bark or anything in nature. I mentioned the kiln as collaborator, and so I thought I should show the two kilns that I fire mostly. I have an electric kiln and a gas kiln, so I can choose which kiln to use and which clay body to best express my ideas. I'm kind of taking my work into another zone right now where it kind of combines some of the technical parts of the urns and also the quench pieces with the gold luster. This is the Prospector's collection, and I'm using those layered slips and glazes in a very painterly, spontaneous way, and then using the kiln to melt them and basically, speeding up the geologic process that would happen over millions of years into 24 hours. So this is a before and after of the same piece. And working vertically, so there's some more gravity involved. having a solo show in Sonoma at the Alley Gallery, which is near my studio. And I just wanted to invite everyone to that show. It's going to be in the spring of 23. The date is going to be decided soon, but feel free to come visit me in my studio and reach out and say hi. So thank you.
Thank you, Kayla, for sharing your process and all of your work. Next, to close the artist part of the program, we're honored to welcome Beth Ames Swartz, who, as I mentioned, has been making art since the 1960s and 70s. And I just want to mention that as an art historian myself, Beth's work was really pivotal in the exhibition because she started working in the mid 20th century when, as we have spoken about many times together, was really a pivotal point in the 20th century between working in the studio on works that were considered to be high art or, gallery art market pieces into a whole movement of artists who really wanted to get outside, who wanted to work with the earth, wanted to work with the ideas that we work with now about the climate and the planet and things that nature brings us, ways to protect nature and the elements. So Beth brings us a long history of that type of work, and we welcome you, Beth, to present the work that you included in Fire Transforms, as well as any of the other pieces and processes that you'd like to discuss. Thanks.
Hi, I've been working for 60 years, and it's a long process. When I moved from New York to Arizona in '59, I was really distressed. I was newly married, and I had bonded with the earth in Arizona, but more because of the beauty and the greenery. And Arizona was so harsh and so in your face and so awful. And I went out into the landscape and did all kinds of landscape work. And then my life changed when I went down the Colorado River in the raft twice in the mid 70s. And I bonded with the earth in a whole different way. And I did, I have such a long history that I've abbreviated a lot. So there's a lot on my website, all books and catalogs and exhibitions, and there's a film. But I want to focus tonight on the very basis of my work, which is transformation. And I truly believe that the only way that we can survive as a culture is if we treat each other kindly and love each other. And I feel that my whole life has been devoted to the idea that really I sort of invented with this process ritual in the early, I would say the mid 70s, which is the idea. I asked a scientist, what's the secret to life? And he said, well, we need order and disorder, but we need a little more order. Well, I didn't like the idea of entropy. So I started with the idea of meditation and then rolling out the large scrolls of paper outside. And then that was birth. And then the concept of death, mutilating with a screwdriver. And then this whole idea of rebirth, life, death, rebirth, creating beauty out of destruction and using the earth from various sites around the world and projects that I did. But this is the basic concept of how to create beauty out of destruction. And life, it's interesting, fire is a transforming energy force. And we've had it since the beginning of time. And so this is, I think, the pivotal story of all my art. And then I think the culmination of this was a project I did in the 80s, going to Israel and honoring women. Yes, I guess you could say I'm an ecofeminist as well as a transformative artist, and honoring women in Jewish history. And I worked with the Tree of Life and the idea of life, death, rebirth at each site, and each woman at each site that I found, and I honored these women at various sites. And it's interesting, in the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, you have the feminine pillar, the masculine pillar, and the pillar of equilibrium. And so all the great masters, and I've done a lot of projects, and they're all based on the idea of who are the masters and what have they taught us. And every great religion or every great concept or philosophy tells us that all life is sacred. And why haven't we learned it yet? Another big project I did in the mid-'80s, it traveled to museums as well as a move. It's called a moving point of balance. And in this case, I used the 7 chakras. And I went to 7 sacred sites, and I worked at each site honoring the earth and doing rituals for the healing of the earth. And I dressed in the color of the chakra. And then the culmination was a project, I called it a moving point of balance. I went to about 9 museums, and you actually walked into the color light bath and got bathed in light. And then the 7 paintings dealt with the 7 sacred sites that I went around Europe and United States. This is another installation. I had to buy rugs, and I had to have an installationist, and and the culmination was so interesting because I met this Indian medicine man, and he left his medicine wheel that were all carved, a healing wheel, and I met him shortly before the exhibition started, and I included the exhibition in the in Moving Point of Balance, and he used this for healing for 40 years. So I guess you could say that I'm interested in healing, and I'm interested in transformation, and I'm interested in all the things that we need to survive. I did a project in New York called A Story for the 11th Hour, where the Buddha is cradling the planet, and I combined a lot of the different philosophies, but basically this is called Charging the Species at the 11th Hour with Love and Compassion, and these are the acupuncture points. One of the big projects that I did in the 80s was based on 8th century Chinese poetry. And most of these projects have catalogs of books, and they're all on the internet, so I won't go into detail. But the interesting thing is the poetry that we translated from the 8th century, it's all about the earth. Only in the mindless waters remain. And I sit together the mountain and me, and only the mountain remains. And I guess you could say now in this new series, based on Hart Crane's poetry, because a lot of poetry has inspired me, is based on a poem that he did called Broken Tower, and the name of the series is Broken World. And it's very interesting because it's this line that really kept going around my mind and still inspiring me. And so it was, I entered the broken world to trace the visionary company of love. And now my work is more of an apparition of fire, and these are 3 pieces in the show, rather than actually a picture of it or even working with it. And this is one of the last pieces of this new series, Broken World. So, in conclusion, let me just say that I think it's critical for us to care about the earth, and it's critical for us to care about each other. And I'm profoundly grateful to Rina and all the artists in the show, because we need to believe that we can transform the negativity and the anger and the rage that's coming at all of us. And it's almost like the world and the earth is calling to us again, because I work with many Indian elders, and the reverence of the earth is the critical aspect of how we can care about each other, love each other, and also love our earth. Thank you very much.
Mhm. Thank you, Beth. Well, it's so wonderful to listen to everyone. Thank you, artists, for sharing so deeply about your processes and so carefully. It's very clear that you took so much time to make your presentations tonight, and we all battle with, 7 minutes, and that's not a very long presentation. You've done a spectacular job of showing us an entire career in your presentation. So thank you so much for putting all that time in. What I would like to do is just pose a couple of ideas about some of the amazing commonalities among all of your works, and just have the artists talk a little bit about some of, I'll put a question or a topic out there, and I'd like each one of you to chat a little about your ideas about that. First of all, though, I want to say that, we started with Mirang's work and ended with Beth's, and that was intentional on my part, because these are the two artists who have the longest careers in the exhibition. They've both been working since the 70s, as both of them has explained, in different ways, but moving toward new ways to look at, ways to see nature, ways to feel it, ways to connect with it. And then Jonah and Kala, who will one day have 60-year careers that they'll be able to report on, are also directly responding to the way in which their materials connect with the earth and the environment. All of the artists invited to participate in Fire Transforms would all be called, would call themselves eco artists, as Beth brought up, or environmental artists. And I think that the first question that I'd like to ask all of them, with the many connections that you've brought up in your materials and your processes, is, do you consider yourself to be an environmental artist, or, as Beth used the term, eco artist? I think that many times those are interchangeable. And how have you grown into that role, and how do you see yourself? We often call environmental artists activist artists, meaning that they use their art to bring a message to viewers. And I'm wondering if you connect your art with what it can do for viewers and how it can transform viewers' points of view about the environment. So if you can take your mutes off, that would be great, so that we can just have a little discussion. And I wonder if anyone would like to go first.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Just something you touched on reminded me of when Beth said in her presentation that it's so important to have reverence for the earth, and that's what's going to bring us together and create empathy and change and understanding and love. It's that reverence that I try to bring into my work, like kind of the awe-inspiring and memories of place and specificity of place. So for me, it's more of trying to inspire that reverence than actually pinpointing a certain message like an activist might do. I'd rather inspire them to kind of find them being like anyone that would be interested in helping create change through the art.
No better activism than inspiration.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing for me. And I think doing this show and being able to have the opportunity to do an actual immersive installation, I think I feel that more now, and along that lines of what you were saying, Rina, more so in this immersive installation as opposed to single art pieces that you make or that I've made that I've put on the wall. And I think, it is, I haven't really thought about it quite as much as maybe I should have, but I definitely feel that now, and I see that now after doing this installation and seeing how, you know, it can be very, yeah, transformative in that way of even just, yeah, in your way of thinking, and how you can reach people. And again, I'm you know, I'm not trying to beat your head over with a stick with it, but like just to like being able to kind of, you know, through my own upbringing and whatnot, be able to share that experience and in that way. Yeah. That makes sense.
I find some kind of difference between other Occidental, Western artists and Asian artists as me. We grew up, probably not younger generation, but when we grew up, we are part of the nature, right? So when we go out in the morning and then, you know, every day, we always kind of being part of the nature instead of finding out something is wrong with the nature, something is wrong with this issue and that issue. So my work is always kind of a wonderful thing. How can I show this wonderful emotion, wonderful nature into my art instead of, oh, something's wrong with the earth, something is wrong with you know, fire and this disasters, and so we have to do something. I think that is more kind of a positive, more active nature of Western thought. But and then also my art is rather kind of passive, but kind of accepting whatever we have and kind of harmonize with it. I think that's what I find, all those work from other peoples and myself. So, yeah.
Well, it's all of the above.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the reverence, it's the harmony. But, you know, as although I'm not specifically religious, I've absorbed and have the whole Jewish concept of Tikkun Olam, which is the healing of the world, that our job, this is the way I was brought up. My parents were good deed doers or mitzvah doers. And so I see my art and the way I function in the world. And you know, I've had a breakfast club for artists for 22 years. I brought the neighborhood together and cooperation among neighbors and all these things, but it's part of Tikkun Olam and it's part of mitzvah doing. And it's part of, you know, our job is to help to make the world a better place. And activism can be the simplest thing as bringing a gift to somebody in the hospital or helping a child learn to read. And what, you know, in our particular way, we've made art, but it's an offering. It's a sacred devotion in some ways. And that's what I believe, and that's how I've tried to live my life.
Thank you all for talking about that. That's great. I loved hearing you all talk about different ideas of activism. I believe the same thing, that, I mean, I basically have decided that my curating is a form of activism, but maybe it's a quiet form of activism. And I like that we're re-examining that word and what action is for artists in view of environmental issues and nature. I don't think anybody, I think we have a shy audience tonight, or else they're so captivated by listening to you all talk that they don't want to ask any questions, but just listen. So audience members, if you have any comments, questions, anything you'd like to share, please do go ahead and write it in the Q&A. Also comment in the meantime, I can always think of questions and topics to talk about, so we'll move forward that way. And Karen, if you have anything that you'd like to add, please jump right in too. I know that, you know, using fire as a medium is something that's really central to the idea of transformation, and you've all talked about that. I'm wondering if you can talk about how a little bit more about how fire itself became important to you, and how that fits into the exhibition as a whole, because we did have 3 themes. We had living with fire, artists who had actually been involved in wildfires and who had seen the destruction, as Jonah calls it, but in a much more dramatic way than just what normally happens at the level of the forest in its natural state. Then we had a number of artists who were what we called learning with fire. We all learn with it, but they're almost working as scientists doing research about fire mapping and the ways that fire moves, and the way that trees can be more or less fire retardant, for example. And I'm wondering if you, looking around at the other art that was in the show, looking at your own work of working with fire, just some ideas about the exhibition itself, and why you've been calling it important, and why your participation is important in it. That's a big one, but just general remarks about your inclusion in the exhibition.
I will say some of the artists mentioned this idea, but I'd like to bring it a little more, personally. Many of our lives have had trauma, and working with fire personally has helped me deal with the traumas in my life in a very visceral way, and it has become a healing mechanism. I know we don't think of it that much in that way, but it's fascinating to me to see all the artists and working with danger. Life is dangerous in and of itself, but how do we deal with those dangers, whether they're traumatic things that happen to us or things that we see in the world and we want to change, we want to help, we want to transform. And fire somehow has it all embedded in it, because it is dangerous. You can get hurt. And then seeing what you've done with this idea and all the different aspects of it, that we actually can transform trauma, whether it's trauma to the earth or trauma to our own individual selves, because it's as above, so below. I mean, in the Kabbalah and in most systems, it's the macrocosm and the microcosm. And so we live in the earth. And that's what I love about fire, because it can be all of it. And that's why I like the idea of transformation. So I thank you so much for doing this.
I guess I should have just asked, what do you love about fire? Thank you, Beth.
It's scary.
For making it quick.
Scary thing.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead, others.
Yeah, I was just gonna reiterate that sort of, and it is all encompassing, because it's something that, as a human species, when we mastered fire, that we were able to explode as a species, as it helped us get through, that tough beginning. But then it also is, can be destructive. So yeah, I like what Beth was saying, is it's all encompassing, and that's why I think, learning to live with it and understand it more, then you're not, so just, afraid of fire. I got, it's all bad. It's, you have to look at the whole picture to really, understand it.
It's also, there's a lot in life we can't control. We certainly can't control anybody else, what they do. I mean, we can raise our children and hope for the best. But somehow when you're working in with fire, it's the way, oh my goodness, it's scary. But look, I'm controlling it. I can get the water and pour it out, or I can Yeah, it really healed me in a very deep way. It really did. I don't know, with this torch, how do you protect yourself?
The
working with
torch, when you use the torch, you don't feel anything really dangerous, anything. As I mentioned in before, when you started to work, the fire kind of leads you, and especially when you wear some kind of a dark glass, it is part of kind of a meditation, you know, it is quiet, and then there's no other lights except one torch light, and it's moving and, you know, in the space. So it is kind of a wonderful feeling, and I really enjoy it. And fire has two concepts, right? Destructions and also creation. And I always love that kind of a double at an aside double fire, and it's amazing. And as any other natural elements, it's really great, you know, thing that we can appreciate. That's what
very brave.
Thanks.
How about you, Jonah, or Kayla? Is it dangerous? Does it feel dangerous?
Not, no, I mean, I think it is, for me, it's also meditative, you know, especially with the glass burn panels. It's, you know, it's also just the fluidity of the glass that, you know, it is definitely leading me. You know, I always say I influence its descent onto the wood. But I don't, you know, I'm not controlling it fully. And even with the burning water, it's like I'm prepared. I have these water streams there happening, and I know they're there, and so I can really get a little bit more intense and crazy with the fire because I've already set up these boundaries with it. And it always, you know, doesn't always. Sometimes it gets away from me a little bit, but yeah, I never really feel like it's you know, scared of it in that way.
If you're scared, you cannot work.
Yeah.
Right. So when you work, you only think about work.
Yeah.
So the medium and tools, you forget about it, and you only think what you want to do. And that's how artists, the life is great, because it is wonderful to work. And then when it's finished, it's wonderful to have some beautiful one, and then people like, and you know, something like that. So I really feel like it is a blessing to be an artist at my age.
Definitely.
Look back on my life and say, wow, it is great. I don't know whether Beth will agree with me, but
It's a privilege.
yeah,
I love artists.
it is. Yeah, it is a great blessing. Yeah.
I don't directly work with the fire because it's in the kiln. The heat it's like heat work basically, but I have to be in control of it and then set up a scenario in which the fire and the heat creates this other thing that I don't have exact control over. So it's sort of, it's once removed from me in a way. So I'm almost like there's a space between me and the material, and the fire fills that space, but there's, I always try to react to each previous work. And Jim asks about happy accidents, and I definitely respond to like small moments or big moments that I'm surprised from or that are unexpected, and try to kind of develop those things. And the heat work with ceramic is critical to melt and harden the material. So I'm always using temperature, but it's kind of different than the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was going to say all of my work in a way is master of the controlled accident, because, you know, I pour the paint on and I wash it off, and with the fire, you know, the water is there, but you watch it and then you know when to put it out. And the aspect of, I think when you work with fire, and in all my work in a way, it is mastering the accident and then honoring it. I was going to say too about being an artist in life itself, it's really a lot is about gratitude, being grateful.
Mhm.
Well, this is an astounding conversation, and we're getting to the point where we need to close. The happy accident was one of the great questions. The artist was relating it to watercolor, but you've talked about that. There was one other question that I want you to hold, because Karen has one last question to close with. And that was one of our listeners asked how this exhibit has impacted your art. I think Karen wants to look at the future and see where you think you might be going. Thanks so much for being here, and Karen will now close things up for us and do a conclusion for the session.
Yeah, this has been an amazing talk. So the question is specifically for Jonah, but I'd like to put it out to all of the artists in terms of how this exhibition may have impacted your work. And then, of course, Kala talked a little bit about what's next in terms of her work, but we'd also love to hear what is next for all of you, upcoming projects, exhibitions, all that good stuff.
Starting with anybody.
Well, I just want to keep working. I'm 86. So I see my friends falling around me and disappearing. And I feel lucky to have so many young artists around me. But I really work intuitively, process oriented. And right now, my only big project is to stay alive.
I think
You're doing a good job of that, Beth.
Thank you.
next generation is me. I'm 70-some, and I'm still working every day, and I'm trying to find something new, and it just come and by accident, as you said, and it is great. And next year I have some shows coming too, and things like that. So yeah, and also during this exhibit, I observed many other artists' work, especially from the disaster. They found some art pieces. I really kind of respect what is art is and how are the artists, especially those artists who create art from the disaster. That was really something amazing. And this exhibit was great for me in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just, maybe even, again, going back to the question of the eco-activism sort of thing, of just thinking about my art in context, maybe to a bigger picture, and maybe that's how it has influenced me the most. Putting it into a little bit more of a bigger context, and what that will look like, I'm not really sure, but just has influenced me in that way of just being able to step back and look at the whole idea and the whole encompassing idea.
I mentioned that I want to continue experimenting with glaze and slip melting together and using the kiln as a collaborator, and just logistically speaking, being really bold with those experimentations to see how far I can push it. I think will be really exciting, and integrating more of a sense of particular places into these pieces. I was really inspired by the Sacred Places project that Beth did. And, I think a lot about that, and rivers and places that are being lost, and somehow honoring them or bringing attention to them.
Thanks to all of you. Karen?
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being part of Fire Transforms, and thank you all for joining us tonight. This was a totally inspiring talk, and I really enjoyed it. And I want to thank all of the participants for being here. And just a final reminder that there's one more day. The show is open, so encourage everyone to come and see the show before it closes or see it again. We are open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Thank you all.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.